Okay, ready for a deep dive into something both ancient and surprisingly relevant today? We're going to be talking about Noah's Ark and the Great Flood.
But get this, we're not just talking about the Bible here.
We're talking flood myths from all over the world. Ancient Mesopotamia.
Hinduism, even Native American traditions.
Everyone seems to have a version of this story,
What's fascinating, isn't it? All these stories,
despite their different origins.
they share this common thread. A devastating flood that wipes out civilization.
A chosen survivor.
And a message of renewal.
So the question is, why is this narrative so universal? What is it about a great flood that speaks to something deep within the human experience?
Right. It's not like they were all comparing notes on the weather back then.
Speaking of which, our sources mentioned the Epic of Gilgamesh.
It's this Mesopotamian text that actually predates the Bible.
And it tells a story of a guy named Utnapishtim who builds this giant boat to survive a massive flood.
Sent by the gods, right? Sound familiar?
It certainly does. The Epic of Gilgamesh gives us a glimpse into just how ancient these flood narratives are,
The fact that it predates the Bible suggests a shared cultural memory.
perhaps even rooted in real historical events.
Okay, so are you saying there might actually be some historical basis?
For these flood stories, like maybe a real flood inspired all these myths.
Exactly. Think about early civilizations settling near rivers and coastlines,
These areas were not only fertile.
but also prone to catastrophic flooding.
One theory points to the flooding of the Black Sea around 7,000 years ago as a potential trigger for these myths.
Imagine the impact of such an event on the people who witnessed it.
It's not hard to see how those memories could be woven into powerful, enduring stories.
Wow, the Black Sea flood theory.
That's wild. So what kind of evidence supports that? Did they find ancient togas floating around?
Okay, bad joke, but seriously.
What did they find?
Well, it's not quite togas.
But scientists have found geological evidence of a massive flood in the Black Sea region.
Dating back thousands of years.
They've even discovered submerged settlements.
And ancient shorelines that suggest this dramatic rise in water levels.
This event would have been catastrophic, displacing entire communities.
And leaving a lasting mark on the collective memory of the region.
Okay, I'm starting to see how real flood could become the stuff of legends.
But let's talk about the Ark.
I mean, that's what everyone wants to know, right?
Does it really exist?
Did anyone ever find it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
And it's a question that has fueled countless expeditions and debates over the years.
The most famous location, of course, is Mount Ararat in Turkey.
It's mentioned in the Bible as the Ark's resting place.
So naturally, that's where a lot of the stratas have been focused.
Makes sense. So what about Mount Ararat? Any luck there?
Did they find splinters, boat blueprints, a lost Ark rider's whip?
Well, there have been some intriguing discoveries.
But nothing conclusive yet.
One of the most famous is the Durupinar site.
A boat-shaped formation on Mount Ararat.
That was discovered back in 1959.
They even used ground-penetrating radar and found some interesting structures there.
It definitely got people talking.
I bet it did. It sounds like something straight out of an Indiana Jones movie.
Okay, don't leave me hanging.
What kind of structures? Was it a fully stocked galley? A crow's nest with a view?
Well, not quite.
The radar images showed what appeared to be parallel walls and compartments.
Some people even interpreted these as evidence of animal stalls or storage areas.
Fueling speculation that it could be the remains of the Ark.
Okay, but they haven't found any ancient animal crackers to confirm that theory, right?
So what's the scientific consensus on the Durupinar site? Is it the real deal?
Or just a really convincing rock formation?
While it's a fascinating site that continues to capture the imagination,
The scientific community remains skeptical,
geologists have argued that the formation is most likely a natural rock formation,
called a linear fold.
created by geological processes over millions of years.
So while it's shaped like a boat, it's probably not Noah's Ark.
Okay, case closed on the Durupinar site, for now at least. But,
Our sources mention another intriguing find on Mount Ararat.
those wooden beams that were discovered back in 2010?
What's the story there?
Ah, yes, the 2010 expedition. A group of evangelical explorers claimed they found the remains of the Ark high up on Mount Ararat.
At an elevation of about 13,000 feet.
Okay, 13,000 feet, that's dedication. They must have really wanted to find that Ark.
But did they bring back any souvenirs? Maybe a life vest with Noah's crew on it?
Not quite. But they did claim to have carbon dated the wood they found to around 4,800 years old.
Which, if accurate...
Would place it right around the time the Ark would have been afloat.
Whoa, that's pretty compelling. So did they find the Ark or what?
Well, that's where things get a bit murky.
While the discovery generated a lot of buzz, the scientific community had its doubts,
First of all, the team wouldn't disclose the exact location of their find.
making it impossible for other researchers to independently verify their claims.
That seems a bit suspicious, doesn't it? Like, they were trying to keep Noah's Ark all to themselves.
It did raise some eyebrows.
And there were concerns about the reliability of the carbon dating.
Carbon dating, while generally reliable, has its limitations,
There's always a margin of error.
and contamination of the samples can skew the results.
It's possible the wood was old, but not necessarily from the Ark.
Okay, so the mystery of the Ark's final resting place continues.
But after diving into all these theories and expeditions,
I'm starting to think that maybe finding the physical Ark isn't really the point.
what really captivates us is the story itself, right?
Precisely. Whether or not the Ark is ever found.
The story's impact on our collective consciousness is undeniable.
These flood narratives, passed down through generations.
Likely served a purpose beyond just entertainment.
Right. Imagine huddling around a fire thousands of years ago, listening to tales of a great flood that wiped out the world.
It must have been terrifying and awe-inspiring at the same time,
Exactly. They probably served as cautionary tales.
reminding people of the immense power of nature.
And the importance of respecting it.
But these stories also offer a message of hope.
Despite the devastation, there's always a survivor, a new beginning.
It's like saying, hey, no matter how bad things get, humanity can bounce back, but on a much larger scale.
Do you think that's part of the reason why these stories have resonated for so long?
Absolutely. They tap into something fundamental about the human experience, our capacity for resilience.
Think about it. After a devastating flood, you'd have to rebuild everything
Rethink your relationship with the environment.
and find new ways to thrive.
Talk about a fresh start. It's like hitting the reset button on civilization.
And that brings us to something we touched upon earlier, this idea of Noah being chosen because he was righteous.
What does that even mean in the context of this story?
And is it relevant to us today?
That's a question that has sparked endless debate.
But at its core, righteousness in this context likely refers to living in alignment with a higher moral code.
Being ethical, compassionate, and just...
So basically, being a good person.
But in a world facing climate change, social injustice,
And all sorts of complex challenges.
what does it mean to be righteous in the 21st century?
What would a modern-day Noah do?
That's the question, isn't it?
Perhaps it starts with recognizing our interconnectedness with each other and with the planet,
It's about acting with empathy
considering the consequences of our actions.
and striving to leave the world a better place than we found it.
It's like that old saying, we don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. We have a responsibility to be good stewards of this planet.
Exactly. And that sense of responsibility
A commitment to building a better future.
is perhaps the most enduring message of the Ark.
It makes you think.
If we were tasked with building a modern-day Ark, what knowledge, values, or resources would we deem essential for the survival and flourishing of humanity? What lessons from the past would we want to preserve for future generations?
It's a thought-provoking question. Perhaps it's not just about tangible things.
But also about preserving the stories
the values.
and the knowledge that have helped us thrive for millennia,
It's about keeping those stories alive
so future generations can learn from our mistakes.
and build a better future.
It's like passing a torch.
But instead of fire,
It's wisdom, compassion.
and a sense of shared responsibility for our planet.
While the search for the physical Ark might continue to captivate us.
It's the search for these enduring values that truly matters, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
And perhaps that's the most valuable lesson we can glean from this ancient story.
So while we may never know for certain if Noah's Ark was real,
Or simply a powerful allegory.
the questions it raises about our relationship with the natural world
Our responsibility to each other.
and our capacity for resilience continue to resonate today.
But before we wrap up our deep dive into the flood myth, let's shift gears for a moment.
And delve into some of the fascinating details about the Ark itself.
Yes, let's explore the more tangible aspects of this enduring tale. Have you ever wondered about the logistics of building such a massive vessel?
The materials used, the sheer scale of the project.
Absolutely. It's one thing to talk about an ark in a story.
But it's quite another to imagine actually building one.
What kind of logistical nightmares would Noah have faced? Where would he even find enough wood to build a boat that big?
That's a great question.
And it's something that has puzzled both scholars and shipbuilders for centuries.
The Bible doesn't go into great detail about the construction process.
But it does give us some clues.
According to the book of Genesis, God instructed Noah to build the ark out of gopher wood.
Now, nobody knows for sure what gopher wood actually is.
Gopher wood. That sounds like something you'd use to build a treehouse for squirrels.
Okay, I know. Bad joke.
But seriously, what kind of wood could withstand a massive flood?
Well, some scholars believe that gopher wood might refer to cypress wood,
Which was plentiful in the ancient Near East.
and known for its durability and resistance to water damage.
Okay, cypress wood.
I can see that. Sturdy and reliable, just like Noah himself.
But even if they had the right kind of wood, building a boat that size must have been a monumental task.
Absolutely. The Bible describes the ark as being incredibly large, about 450 feet long
75 feet wide.
and 45 feet high,
To put that in perspective, that's longer than a football field.
and about as high as a 4-story building.
Wow, that's huge. I can barely assemble a bookshelf from IKEA. And Noah built a floating zoo. He must have had a heck of a construction crew.
Indeed.
And it wasn't just the size that was impressive.
It was the design,
The Bible mentions that the ark had 3 decks.
and was divided into compartments.
Compartments. So it wasn't just one big, happy floating family. They had separate rooms.
Well, we can assume that the compartments served a practical purpose,
Likely for separating different types of animals.
and storing food and supplies,
It would have been a complex operation.
ensuring the well-being of all those animals during their long voyage.
Speaking of animals, how did Noah even get all those creatures on board? Did he have a system? A giant ramp? A cosmic cattle call?
That's another detail that has sparked a lot of imagination. The Bible simply states that God brought the animals to Noah.
2 of every kind.
Now, whether you interpret that literally or metaphorically is up to you.
But either way, it makes for a pretty incredible visual, doesn't it?
Well, I can just picture Noah with a clipboard, checking off animals like a cosmic bouncer.
2 lions. Okay, you're good. 2 giraffes. Watch your heads. And hey, where are those 2 sloths going? Get back here.
I think Noah had his work cut out for him, to say the least.
No doubt. But jokes aside,
The Ark story isn't just about a boatload of animals.
it's a story about survival
Resilience.
and the enduring power of hope, even in the face of unimaginable challenges.
And those are themes that resonate just as strongly today as they did thousands of years ago.
Absolutely.
The Ark serves as a potent reminder that humanity has been facing seemingly insurmountable challenges since the dawn of time.
And yet, here we are,
We find ways to adapt, to overcome,
and to learn from our mistakes.
and that's a powerful message to carry with us, no matter what storms we may encounter in our own lives.
Well said. So, while we may never uncover all the mysteries surrounding Noah's Ark,
The story's enduring legacy lies in its ability to inspire and connect us to something far greater than ourselves.
Indeed.
It's a story that continues to resonate across cultures and throughout time,
Inviting us to ponder life's biggest questions.
and search for meaning in a world often defined by uncertainty.
Now, that's something worth reflecting on.
But before we get too lost in contemplation, let's take a moment to address a question that often arises when discussing ancient stories like Noah's Ark. How much of it should we take literally?
Is it meant to be a historical account?
A metaphorical tale?
Or perhaps a blend of both?
That's a fascinating question.
And one that has been debated by theologians, scholars, and everyday people for centuries.
There's no single, definitive answer,
The beauty of these ancient stories is that they can be interpreted in multiple ways.
each offering its own unique insights and perspectives.
Some people approach the story of Noah's Ark with a literal interpretation.
Viewing it as a historical account of a real event.
They point to the detailed descriptions of the Ark's dimensions
The specific instructions given to Noah.
and the global scope of the flood as evidence of its historicity.
That's an interesting perspective. It's certainly tempting to look for historical evidence to support these ancient tales.
But what about those who view the story more metaphorically?
What do they see in the story of Noah's Ark?
Those who favor a more metaphorical interpretation often focus on the story's symbolic meaning.
And its timeless themes.
They might see the ark not as a literal vessel,
But as a representation of salvation, hope.
or the preservation of life in the face of destruction.
The flood itself could be interpreted as a metaphor for the chaos and upheaval that often precede periods of renewal and transformation.
It's amazing how a story can hold such different meanings for different people.
It's like looking at a tapestry. Depending on your perspective, you might focus on the intricate details of the threads, or step back to appreciate the grander picture it creates.
Zag.
And both perspectives are valid and valuable.
The story of Noah's Ark invites us to grapple with big questions about faith
History.
and the human condition,
It challenges us to examine our own beliefs.
and consider multiple viewpoints.
Ultimately, it's up to each individual to decide how they interpret the story.
But regardless of whether you view it as literal history
A symbolic narrative.
or something in between.
There's no denying the profound impact it has had on our collective imagination.
Absolutely.
The story of Noah's Ark continues to fascinate
Inspire.
and challenge us.
It reminds us of the fragility of life
The power of nature.
and the resilience of the human spirit,
It's a story that transcends time and culture.
connecting us to something far greater than ourselves.
And on that note of interconnectedness and enduring themes, we'll pause our deep dive for now.
But don't worry, we'll be back with the exciting conclusion of this epic tale in just a moment. Stay tuned. Okay, so we've talked about the global presence of flood myths and the possibility of a real event sparking these stories.
And the enduring power of the Ark as a symbol.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious about something
If we were to step back from the literal interpretation of the Ark for a moment,
and view it metaphorically.
what do you think it represents?
What's the bigger message here?
That's a great question. When we look at the Ark metaphorically, it becomes less about a physical boat
And more about a vessel for preservation.
and renewal,
It represents that which carries us through times of turmoil.
and allows for a new beginning.
So it's like a lifeboat for humanity's values and aspirations.
Exactly. Think about what Noah was tasked with preserving, not just his family.
But also a representation of all living creatures.
In a metaphorical sense, the Ark could be seen as a repository for the diversity of life
Knowledge.
and hope,
It's about safeguarding the essential elements needed to rebuild.
and create a better future.
That's a powerful image. It's not just about escaping the flood.
It's about carrying forward the best of humanity and the potential for renewal.
And that resonates even more strongly today.
As we face global challenges like climate change and social division,
It certainly does.
the Ark story reminds us that we have a responsibility to act as stewards for our planet.
And for each other.
It encourages us to ask ourselves, what values and principles are we carrying forward?
What kind of future are we building?
And what will we need to weather the storms ahead?
It's like that saying, we're all in the same boat.
We have a shared responsibility to navigate these challenges together.
And find solutions that benefit all of humanity.
Precisely. And just like the Ark provided refuge and a fresh start,
We too have the capacity to create positive change.
and build a more sustainable and just world,
It starts by recognizing our interconnectedness.
and working together towards a common goal.
So while the search for the physical ark might continue,
The real treasure lies in uncovering those timeless values of resilience, responsibility, and hope that the story embodies,
beautifully said, the ark's legacy lies not in its physical form.
but in its enduring message of hope
Renewal.
and the potential for positive change,
It's a message that continues to resonate throughout history.
reminding us of our shared humanity and our capacity to weather any storm.
And on that note, we'll leave you with this final thought.
What would you include on your own metaphorical Ark?
What values, knowledge, or hopes would you carry forward to ensure a brighter future?
It's a question worth pondering.
And one that I hope will stay with you long after this deep dive.
And there you have it, folks. Another deep dive complete.
Until next time, keep exploring those fascinating corners of history, mythology, and the human experience.